Okay, welcome to our webinar, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dave Corbin, and I have the pleasure of working with the Gleeds team and our clients across multiple sectors all over the world. I'm also the lead for the Association for Project Management's Built Environment Interest Network, helping to share best practice and innovation across the built environment community. So I'm delighted to be hosting this session today. In partnership with Barbour ABI, we'll be discussing the critical infrastructure sectors of data centres, defence, energy and infrastructure. Following this introduction, we'll provide you with a brief construction market overview before moving on to our panel discussion and Q&A. This webinar is also being recorded and will be sent to you after today's session. Today, we've published our new Global Critical Sectors report, which will soon be available on our website. Please do download and take a read. The main theme is how these sectors are becoming deeply interconnected. The pressures shaping them are no longer isolated, they're converging, investment is accelerating, and this is reshaping how organisations plan, invest and operate. Today's conversation is about understanding that convergence and what it means for people responsible for building, securing and powering the world around us. We're living in an increasingly urban and uncertain world. Cities are now home to 45% of the global population, and that number continues to rise. With this growth comes an urgent need for well-connected buildings, resilient infrastructure, and reliable digital physical networks. At the same time, the demand for data, energy, and security is expanding at a pace, challenging traditional models. Data centres are becoming critical national assets. Defence strategies now depend on digital resilience as much as physical capability. Energy systems must support both sustainability goals and unprecedented consumption. And infrastructure must be smarter, more adaptive, and more integrated than ever before. These sectors are no longer separate pillars, they're part of one ecosystem. Project success in this new landscape depends on more than the amount of capital deployed. It depends on coordination and adaptability. It also depends on the ability of governments, investors, operators and technology partners to execute projects together, not in isolation. The challenges we face, whether geopolitical, environmental, technological or economic, simply don't respect sector boundaries. So with that, I'm delighted to introduce our panel of experts from Gleeds who bring their own insights from across these critical infrastructure sectors. They'll help us unpack the issues, challenge assumptions and explore what it will take to build the next generation of resilient, secure and connected systems. We also have the pleasure of welcoming Tolga Nekar from Barbour ABI, who will provide us with the construction market overview. Finally, please submit your questions using the Q&A function and we'll attempt to get as many of these as possible during question time. You can also email us at insight@gleeds.com at any time. We'll now commence proceedings with Tolga from Barbour ABI. Tolga.
Thank you, Dave. And good afternoon to everyone. So I'm Tolga Nekar, Head of Consultancy at Barbour ABI. And over the next few minutes, I'll be providing an update on the key trends in the UK infrastructure construction. Now, although the next few slides are UK based, many of the trends that we highlight domestically are mirrored in the international stage. So very quickly, for those of you who aren't familiar with Barbour ABI, we're the market leaders in construction market intelligence. Simply put, we track who is building what, where, when, and for how much. In addition to that, we run a whole host of primary research methodologies for our clients, and we produce market insight reports. And that gives us a clear basis to understand what's happening in the market. So why is critical infrastructure so worth looking at? And importantly, why now? It's because it's one of the few areas where growth can be confidently identified in an otherwise static market. So last year, construction output grew by just 1.3%. And whilst we do expect better performance in the years ahead, growth is expected to be limited to between about 2 and 5% through to 2030. But if you look to the chart on the right-hand side, you can see that growth in infrastructure will continuously outperform the rest of the market through to 2030. And so in this stuttering landscape, operators are understandably looking for growth, and large government-backed infrastructure projects are providing that certainty. There are subsectors that are particularly worth calling out. Electricity project spend grew by 18% in the last year, and that's linked to the UK's ambition to become a clean energy superpower. There are high volumes of high value projects out there that are backed by the government's pledge to double onshore wind capacity, triple solar panel capacity, and quadruple offshore wind by the end of the decade. Water and sewage is also worth calling out. It grew by 15% last year. Now, this is in part because we tipped into the AMP8 regulatory cycle in 2025, which is a 5-year investment period that should see about £100 billion flow into our water infrastructure. And so we expect to see continued high levels of growth, especially for the coming couple of years as investment ramps up before maintaining high levels. So our forecasts are supported by significant investment pledges by the government, all in the name of national renewal, which have been reiterated in recent budget announcements. These total about £725 billion of spending, which gives confidence to those operating in the infrastructure space. This is representative of substantial programme of public investment across sectors. In the interest of time, I'll just focus on data centres and clean energy. So, looking at data centres. Data centres have been the focus of many headlines and have been called out as part of the UK's modern industrial strategy. Our current forecasts are that there will be £10 billion worth of construction value in the sector per year by 2029, as the sector sees repeated instances of 30 to 40% growth. This forecast is backed up by over £70 billion of work in the visible pipeline. However, increasingly there are questions being raised over how much of this pipeline will actually come to fruition. If we look beneath the headline numbers, only 36% of the £70 billion in the pipeline is either build ready or on site. That's about half the level that we would usually expect to see in a more established sector like energy. About 23% of the visible pipeline is at very early speculative pre-planning stages. So there is, of course, risk associated with betting on data centres. It's also important to highlight the confluence of critical infrastructure within data centres. They're reliant on water and energy connection, sectors in high demand across user bases at the moment. So we'd expect to see conflicting interests in the pursuit of the opportunity that data centres hold. If we look over at energy, the UK has a clear ambition to become a clean energy superpower. And current conflict in Iran and its impact on the price of oil and the availability of oil should put into sharp focus why developing our own domestic supply of clean energy is so important to the national interest. Now, this chart that you can see was taken from our renewable energy project database that we provide directly to the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. It tracks all renewable energy projects from inception through to operational completion. And so what the chart is showing is the megawatt output of each type of clean energy. Over the last 10 years, the UK's renewable energy operational capacity has doubled. And there's been strong performance across pretty much all sectors within that. The strongest of which has been offshore wind, which has grown by 3 times over that period and now represents about 27% of our renewable energy. It's an area where the UK has identified a competitive advantage, and the Crown Estate owns roughly 12 miles of seabed around the UK. That's an asset that's being used to host offshore wind generation, which now produces about 40% of all of Europe's offshore wind energy. We expect to see continued growth in this space. So I hope those two sectors go to show that it's really not desire to build that's going to be the limiting factor for infrastructure going forwards, but our capacity to deliver. I'll touch on 3 headwinds. The first is planning. So this is a fairly uniquely UK issue. It's well acknowledged and government reforms are expected to improve the matter, but the current situation stymies development. If we take the Lower Thames crossing, planning alone has cost roughly £300 million and taken nearly 15 years since it was initially proposed. The cost of planning is 3 times greater than the entire build cost of the Lærdal Tunnel in Norway, which is the world's largest equivalent. So our slow, costly and uncertain planning process affects our ability to deliver large-scale infrastructure at pace. The next is resource constraints. So it's well reported that we have an ageing and shrinking construction workforce. Since 2019, that workforce is down about 15%. Also, worryingly, over the next 10 years, about 25% of the workforce is expected to retire. So we need to be bringing in around 50,000 more new starters into the sector than we currently do. And we need to focus on retention, because about half of all apprentices drop out within 3 years. The final point is material constraints. Now, this is felt globally, but on the whole, materials are around 40% more expensive than they were in 2020. It's estimated that materials account for about 30 to 40% of the total build cost, which means that inflation has made it about 15% more expensive to build. Simply put, the pot of money is not going to go as far. The ongoing war in Iran is having an immediate impact on costs, with large steel manufacturers reportedly increasing their rates as a direct response. So this problem is not going to go away quickly. I'll leave that there, hopefully a useful framing for the conversation to follow. My details are on the screen, so feel free to reach out directly. Thanks all.
Yeah, thanks, Tolga. Some great context and scene setting, which lines up nicely for the panel discussion. So without further ado, if I can ask the panelists to join the screen, we'll start with you, Dean. Dean, yeah, hi. Where do you see the strongest convergence across the infrastructure, energy, data center, and defence sectors in real project delivery?
Dave, I think what Tolga said really aligns with the two primary areas that I think are the big areas that we see the convergence. First one is has been building for a while actually, and covers the acute skill shortages, requirements to include new technologies and materials throughout the industry, and the need to provide sustainable solutions whilst facing ever-increasing demand from all quarters of the world. This predates the COVID crisis and includes themes that have been recurring. How do we increase productivity? How do we increase the attractiveness of the industry to new entrants? And because there is a commonality of the resources across the critical infrastructure sectors, and as the global economy has emerged post-COVID, this has brought these sort of factors back to the spotlight, and actually been exacerbated by the convergence of the demand coming from these interlinked sectors. The second area is more geopolitical, and it's linked to human development, as the trends to urbanize globally means that the demand for robust and reliable infrastructure is increasing at a faster and faster pace. People demand the latest technologies, and as people move around the world on holiday or for business, they see what's possible, and they bring that back to where they live and request that. Adding this to the increased demand to the climatic issues that we're seeing around the world, the need for infrastructure facilities to be robust and resilient has become paramount, and the attractiveness of urban centres means more and more people are living on the fringes of cities that are putting themselves at risks if critical climatic issues occur, which they are doing more and more frequently. This is heightened by the need to not just provide technology advances, but to provide those resilient solutions, because we're seeing more and more mega climate events happening more frequently. The final geopolitical factor that I think affects us, our sectors, is we're seeing increased tensions between nations that are affecting supply chain routes. We only got to look at what's in the news at the moment. Interconnectivity, the rise of nationalism means that maybe collaborative policy making is in question at the moment, and even the physical assets themselves are being attacked in live conflict zones, and that are active around the world currently. These factors are increasing the demand on critical infrastructures sectors, as the demand is coming from many areas all at once globally. We're experiencing weather events more frequently, and the rise of these conflicts and the damages that brings means that the installation progress we should be advancing is being held back somewhat. And these two areas, Dave, are interconnected. The increasing demand from geopolitical feeds back into the first point and exacerbating it around the industry challenges And we must break this cycle by embracing different ways to deliver and coming together as industry at its widest sense, government, public, private sectors, and the users of critical infrastructure to do things faster and differently to achieve better outcomes.
Yeah, fascinating insights, Dean. I just wonder, Suzanne, would you like to build on that at all?
Thanks, Dave, and thanks, Dean, and good afternoon, everybody. I see convergence strongly expressed in defence across the world. The contested territories arising from climate change or increased pressure on natural resources from mass migration, the points that Dean was expanding on, means that our planning needs to combine traditional military assets with critical national infrastructure, plus the ability to defend it, along with a new era of civil resilience, which, to my mind, is a complete investment and mindset shift. And thinking about who's doing that well in Europe, the gold standard for this sort of integrated planning is found in Finland, whose holistic and comprehensive concept of security prepares them as a resilient nation. Security is everybody's responsibility. And an example of their transport planning, to think of one area, is the scaling of their highways, which can also be used to land aircraft in the instance of threat or crisis. We have good examples in the UK defence estate as well, where resilience thinking and optimising difficult parts of the estate is seen in the repurposing of land over the last 10 years at MOD Lynham in Wiltshire, where 275,000 solar panels are supplying training facilities and contributing to the national grid. And elsewhere, again, thinking about the UK context, but thinking about how this is being applied more widely, the Defence Infrastructure Organisation here is investigating the feasibility of wind power on its own land and has developed a digital estates planning tool to assess the risk to existing and future infrastructure, for example, from peak coastal or flood waters. And finally, thinking to some of your points there, Dean, I see merit in co-location on public realm land of small modular reactors and data centres to create energy supply and the communications resilience.
Yeah, thank you. Steve, perhaps I can bring you in.
Yeah.
What are the capability gaps that are most likely to slow down projects at the moment?
I mean, we are seeing capability gaps right across energy, defence, infrastructure, and data centres, pretty much on a daily basis, and it's a global issue. I suppose two of the main issues that I'd flag, something that construction has suffered with from time immemorial, is kind of the recruitment, the training, the retention of resources across the supply chain. There is a small pool of roles such as electrical engineers, MEP designers, QSs, project managers, commission engineers, schedulers, and down to skilled construction teams. I mean, there's just not sufficient numbers, availability, and also flexibility locationally to meet the demand that's going on across them four sectors. And we also have to consider the wider construction world as well. I mean, within my sector in data centers, the surge in AI, the demand now for data centers, it's unprecedented. Europe and the UK in themselves are very, very strong markets, but they're suffering, and it's a quiet suffering at the moment. That's going to expand, for an outflowing of resource to North America, which is an incredibly booming market right now. Within energy, in certain locations, the transition to net zero is pulling then resources from the same pool into there. Defence has its own, restrictions in terms of where people can work and some of the access that they can have in localities, which again limits the resource pool availability. And traditional infrastructure, roads, railways, bridge, aviation, fighting across there for the same labour shortages. So there's certainly a problem there within that. I mean, recent surveys have shown that within data centres, 70% of operators are struggling to fill roles. We've got a workforce globally which is ageing and not being replaced. More than half of the engineering vacancies now for the built environment are classified as difficult to fill. The result of that is, projects in certain cases are being postponed, programs are being delayed. We're seeing in my sector, 12, 24, 36 months of delay, and costs are increasing. And I think, something which is another reason for these gaps in terms of major capability issues in project delivery, The supply chain, we've seen it in multiple sectors, and it's still an issue in terms of long lead delivery items, something that we talk about a lot in terms of items we need, transformers, switchgear. It's got better, then it's got worse, then it's got better. But the major thing now is also fibre and power connectivity. I mean, fibre, 18 to 36 months, if a good power can be into the multiple years to now get sites in different locations around the globe, that is impacting across all 4 sectors. For example, if a hyperscale data center and a wind farm project come online in a certain region, that can take, all the skills and the availability of labor in that area, and has an impact across. I mean, these 2 gaps, supply chain, people, can really put brakes on projects. It's something that we need to look at, closing them through, I suppose, targeted apprentices, cross-sector talent pipelines, which I think is going to be really, really important. Strategic procurement frameworks will be a difference between, building the ambition and actually seeing these projects realised and infrastructure on the ground. And I think to become more and more integrated is really important. We have to eliminate cannibalising across the sectors, and we need to build that out, reinforce supply chain and resource in an interlinked environment to provide more planned and robust solutions for our clients going forward.
Yeah, and conscious you have a data center focus. Andy, with your energy hat on, are you seeing the same issues?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. We are, Dave, for sure. So to build on a couple of the points that Steve has just talked about, I think another key area where our sectors often struggle with capability and capacity is around integrated project management and controls. So these really help to drive collaboration by harnessing latest technologies, including digital tools and techniques, embracing the opportunities brought to us by AI, for example. And these enable us to make the best use of the data that we have, to better understand where and how we need to improve performance. And that's really key. So Steve talked about apprentices, and I think that's a key point as well. We really do need more early careers and generally just more new talent coming into our critical sectors. So Tolga talked about the fact that nearly half of apprentices withdraw within the first 3 years, and that is a real concern. And I think it's key within each of our 4 key sectors as well. We need that new talent to bring innovations and methodologies, to bring new ways of working, and we need to continue to share these tools and techniques and also take learning from experience from one major program to the next, and we don't do that enough. We can often miss opportunities to bring that LFE due to the nature of the environments that we operate within, which are quite challenging at times and hugely complex. But we need to be able to replicate efficiently and take those lessons learned and improve collectively, and that's always a challenge. I think another key point is we should also continue to drive the increase in focus in all types of diversity within the work that we do and the programs that we're involved in. Diverse thought drives healthy challenge, it drives continuous improvement. And all of this really is key, as this enhances our capabilities collectively.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And Tolga, going back to Steve's points about resourcing, do you have any insights to support
that? Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that it's come up from Dean, Steve, and Andy. It's clearly felt across sectors. I've been doing a little bit of digging, I suppose, into the numbers behind this sort of resourcing leaky pipeline. And I mentioned earlier the headcount loss, 350,000 or so in the last 5 years, and then a further 500,000 due to retire. But what's more worrying than that is the number of years of experience that they take with them. So these are typically experienced folk who are leaving the marketplace. For everyone retiring, we can assume they take 20 or 30 years. When we following Brexit, about 200,000 or so people moved to Europe to take their sort of experience with them. They were in their mid to late 30s, so 10 or so years of experience with each of them. The upshot of this is that we do need to bring more people in, and if even sort of factoring the kind of the 47% churn rate, there is good news because the government has planned about 600 million, I think it is, to sort of encourage more people into the marketplace. And if you kind of follow that churn through on a 10-year period, it about nets out to about 500 or 1,000 or so new entrants into the market. So pretty much offsetting in terms of headcount the number of people that are retiring, which is great, tick. However, there is a net loss of about 11 million years of experience with the 500 or 1,000 or so who have taken 20 to 30 years out of the market versus the people that are bringing 1 or 2 years into the market. That, when you added on to the 4 or so million years of lost experience through the contraction of the UK construction market, means that in a 15-year period, we're losing about 15 million years worth of construction experience, which a quick Google will tell you takes us back to the age of the saber-toothed tiger. So it's a real concern, and I think we need to sort of focus on bringing more people in, but that retention point is so important. And as those people sort of upskill and train into the marketplace, we need to be accepting that they probably won't be delivering at the same rate or efficiency as the 40, 50-year-old experienced head who's left the market.
Yeah, I mean, Tolga, thanks. I mean, 11 million years or 15 million years. Andy, I'm going to come to you, not because that you remind me of a saber-toothed tiger, but a minute or so ago, you mentioned the importance of talent bringing innovative thinking, I think it was, to the table. So what are your thoughts on what can industry do collectively to deliver faster with more predictable outcomes?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. That's a big question. All of our clients want to deliver faster with more predictable outcomes. We'd be a very successful business if we had the perfect ingredients for that. I think the tone is set by decision makers, first and foremost, whether that be government policy makers or the boards, the developers, the asset owners and operators that we work with. But what's key is how these decisions are influenced by industry and the supply chain, and that's where we play a part. For example, in the major infrastructure programs that span several years, and we're involved in plenty of those at Gleeds, the industry is pivoted towards long-term collaborative delivery models that allocate appropriate risk and that drive multi-party engagements with appropriate profits linked to outcomes and consistent performance. And for that to happen, it is completely based around evolution and innovation. And that long-term thinking around these programs enables investment, whether that be early careers, the development of our talents, digital tools and technologies, and that's all widely recognised as a key lever for sustainable enterprises. And this move away from traditional risk-based forms of contracting that have previously sought to allocate completely inappropriate risk at times and transfer that to parties that aren't best placed to manage or mitigate the risk. And in turn, that typically drives adversarial behaviours based around commercial protectionism. And that just doesn't work on these major infrastructure programmes. So these new, more collaborative, multi-party models, they tend to drive sensible corporate governance that allows the supply chain to plan for the longer term with confidence of opportunity based around appropriate returns on investment from sustainable outcome-based commercial models. And this is the enterprise level thinking that brings industry together much earlier in the life cycle than before, to plan the delivery comprehensively and collaboratively with the teams who will deliver these programs, not just the concept stage, but right through the construction stage, through to completion. And that helps to drive continuous improvement and enables investment in and the strengthening of those collaborative relationships, and they drive faster, more predictable delivery of those outcomes. So the mindset really, I think, is one of partnering. By definition, partnering seeks to achieve common, mutually beneficial goals. And this stems from the outcomes sought by the client, the contracting authority. So industry as a collective needs to remain open-minded to exploring those long-term partnerships, whether that be with clients or organisations potentially viewed as competitors beforehand, where there are often complementary objectives and capabilities, and they exist for teams to come together with shared interests to drive that innovation.
Well, that sounds easy enough, doesn't it?
Isn't it just?
Dean, what are your thoughts on collaboration? Do they align with Andy's?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we need to talk about how we do what Andy's just said. And I think by doing it, it will actually help with the previous conversation that Steve was talking about how do we make this industry more attractive to new entrants so that we can, by bringing in new entrants, obviously you bring fresh minds, but you also bring fresh understanding of technologies and digital ways of working. But in reality, the how is what fascinates me is, we talk about the role of government and policy. We need to be thinking not national level, but we need to be thinking about collective agreements for these sectors because they are sub-regional or regional or even global. So we need organisations like the European Union, the African Union, Asian Community, to be starting to think about how do they deal with the pipeline of projects in a way that then matches some of these constraints that we've spoken about. Insertion of common international standards, collaborative contracts, working behaviours will mean that the traditional view of the industry will change and open up opportunity for diverse inputs. You know, Andy spoke about the correct risk allocation. We need to get there on these big projects. You know, prioritizing the plan, doing the things that are going to give us the biggest bang for the buck, and then getting the right people to do the right things is key. Adoption of new innovative construction practices needs to happen. It was interesting to see on the new hospital programme in the UK how much modular buildings are being used. And then just doing our core business, better monitoring of programmes that actually focus on actual delivery. You know, a lot of these sectors are dealing with public money, and value for money is required, and delivering these programs with speed is absolutely critical. And I think that's where I am, Dave, in terms of how important collaboration is, because it answers, or is a part of an answer to everything we've spoken about today.
Yeah, thanks. And I can really appreciate the focus on that. Tolga, I'd like to come back to you here. You know, I'd love to know a bit more about what your market research says about this space.
Yeah, so I think I'd probably say that the core role that we play at Barbour ABI is providing market intelligence, which allows people to act with confidence. They understand the opportunities, they understand the risks, and they can take an appropriate course of action. I think what strikes me, sort of, hearing Andy's sort of discussion around multi-party models in particular, and that kind of that collaborative approach to finding more predictable outcomes, is that our clients sit across the entire supply chain. Right? We can be the same. Information is absorbed by manufacturers, as contractors, as developers, as service providers, as government bodies. So there is no reason, in theory, why we can't see a world where they're sharing information more freely and working from that same shared understanding of where the opportunities are and what the timelines are, so that decision making can be sped up, that risk can be removed out of the market as much as possible, and importantly, waste and time can be removed as well from the decision making process.
So thank you for that. And I'm just, before I come to you, Suzanne, I'm just going to remind the audience that if they want to ask any questions, then please use the Q&A function, which should be at the top of your bar. And we'll shortly be going to a Q&A session, so please feel free to throw your questions into there if you have them. For now, though, back to the panel. So Suzanne, I'm going to take us back to that convergence piece, if that's okay. What are the main actions that should be taken to prepare for the converged critical infrastructure?
Thanks, Dave. So thinking about our report, we discuss the convergence of the impacts of global climate change, demographics, economics, and technological advances, which require not only the coherent infrastructure response that we've been discussing, but also adaptation at pace. And thinking through a defence lens, as I do, many ministries of defence worldwide adopt UK methodology to plan their future capability. And this considers organisational, delivery, and operational aspects, which includes interoperability. So these resultant capabilities and the enabling programmes of work that deliver them, in defence, they exist in a slightly insular context, meaning that they connect the people, platforms, information and supporting infrastructure between the defence domains, and those are maritime, land, air, cyber and space. But it's a powerful model which can be used to test, for example, transport, energy, data systems, when we consider how, again, for example, how smart cities and the connectivity of those moving into urban contexts that infrastructure is specified, designed, or upgraded. And thinking to resilience and what this convergence could deliver for us globally, we think of threat typically in terms of events such as those currently gripping the Middle East, but actually there's a greater risk of attack on our grey infrastructure, which could have an equally profound impact on our daily lives. We have many resilience lessons worldwide from COVID, but it's important for us to consider how we would manage if online finance failed, or we have energy blackouts, no public transport, food is in short supply, or there is a lack of water or a build-up of wastewater. And if we think about current instances of those grey infrastructure attacks, thousands of Ukrainians suffered harsh conditions recently without heating, which was as a result of attacks targeted on their power networks, but then also from a lack of resilience in Spain, the week-long power outage, which affected that country quite profoundly last year. So thinking about some of the how, as Dean has been leading us in thinking, starting with the planning, I see this being a complete mindset shift. Requirements and investment planning needs to be broader and more integrated. Pan-region and pan-alliance, as we've discussed, mitigating societal disruption from the impact of any of these global trends. And our planning must combine critical national infrastructure and the ability to defend it, along with traditional military assets and a new era of civil resilience. Thinking then to affordability, there's no avoiding that funding all of this is the massive challenge. And thinking to reports, a 2019 study in the UK on the defence of European land and sea lanes put the cost in today's terms at €1 trillion. Equally recent recommendations from the UK's National Resilience Committee was investment of 1.5% of GDP, which is £40 billion per annum, in addition to the 3.5% target for GDP on defence, but neither of these are funded yet. So the demographic and economic inequalities, along with the global pandemic and conflict since, have seriously strained public funds. And again, thinking to the markets, 70% of the world's market capital lies within the US. So our planning needs to draw upon pluralistic public and private investment to achieve this convergence of critical infrastructure. And so reflecting on pace, and as I call it, the power of now, in Europe, we've grown comfortable in the post-World War II period, assuming that the security, prosperity, and peace are the norm. So I would offer up a few ideas around actions of the hows, as you've invited, Dave. So I think integration, hardening of critical national infrastructure, be it energy, comms, food distribution, water and health systems, the mechanisms to store and distribute essential supplies in the event of global crisis, cyber resilience in public, private, academic and third sectors. IT connects all aspects of society. Development of civilian and military networks for the whole of society resilience, and all of this underpinned by sound finance, specification, procurement, market and labour resilience, which we've discussed, and the good enough thinking to support it and tuned to produce outcomes at pace.
Thank you. And I'm really conscious we're going to get to the questions, but Steve, would you like to just add any final points to that?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, building on a little bit there, what Suzanne said, and to kind of wrap up on that point, I think in practice, what we're trying to say is we really need to move beyond siloed planning, aligned investment models that combine public and private funding, as Suzanne highlighted, but still looking at how we deliver hardened, future-proofed infrastructure, but again at pace. The view of providing potential, program, commercial and assurance frameworks which are unified across defence, energy, infrastructure and data centres. That'll be one of the most effective ways that we get to achieve, and change that mindset and the investment shift as we require to kind of get the convergence of these sectors that we're looking to achieve.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So, okay, well, that brings us nicely to a close. So thanks for all the insights shared over the last 20 minutes or so. We've touched on convergence, constraints, resilience, and delivery, all of which are reshaping how critical infrastructure is planned and delivered. So I'd like to turn to some of the questions from the audience now. So the following I'm going to start with, it wouldn't be right in today's world not to mention AI, right? So a really quick one to put out there for anyone who wants to have a go at this. What's the expected impact of AI on service delivery, both actual and ideal, across the critical sectors? Anyone want to give that a go?
I'll have a go.
Go on then, Dean.
So if you think about one of the critical factors about the skill shortage, so I think actually AI is going to help us take some of those perfunctory matters and tasks that we need to do as part of the construction process. That can be quite laborious, but are repeatable. And I think that's going to help us fill that skills gap a little bit. What it's not going to do, or what it'll do is free our people up, to do the real value added stuff, which is about setting these programs up for success and analysing and providing decision making notes of whatever the data comes out. So what we should see is the correct deployment of AI should fill some of that skills gap that that Toggle was talking about, but also actually that experience gap as well, because actually some of that stuff can just come and be dealt with. But that means that we then need to focus on the other big area, which is how do we train and recruit and retain the right people to be able to do those value added bits at the beginning. So I think AI is great, and I think it will help us, but it's not the panacea.
Right, thanks, Dean. I'm going to another question that came in, which I think, Steve, I'm going to come to you on, given what you said, and Tolga, you might have a view given the planning element to this. If you could change one regulatory or planning constraint tomorrow to accelerate converged infrastructure delivery, what would it be?
I mean, it depends on which country and which region we're talking about right now. But I think, from my
Just
point
one,
of view,
Steve. Just got one.
I think from my point of view, I mean, if we look closer to home, you know, freeing up where we've now got, constraints on certain lands when it comes to, even where we're looking at sites that are not within the green belt, and getting power into them and the access to that and the easements. I mean, that's a very big problem with power right now that people don't talk about. And working with the governments to free that up. And I'm sure Andy's got a view on that from an energy point of view. But I think bringing down them permits to get power to sites with the owner operators and the energy companies is where I'd focus, because that focuses into infrastructure generally. It focuses into defence. Everything needs power. And when we start to look at the timelines and the permits there, breaking them down them hurdles, I think would be very, very important. Tolga, I don't know if you want to add to that.
I think from my perspective, I think that the perennial complaint is that there's a lack of certainty over which way a decision will go in the planning process in the UK at least, and there are sort of rumblings around sort of more automation or I guess sort of more transparent ways of making those planning decisions. But that's going to be a key barrier as far as I can see, because at the moment when you have individual case officers making decisions, depending on which one you may get a different outcome, and that's causing not only delays because people assume they're going to have to go through appeal and planning just to go through appeal anyway. It's also causing the lack of confidence that hampers investment as well.
Thanks, Tolga. And Steve. Andy, I'm just going to pick up one more question, or part of a question actually, just for speed, because we've got a minute left. So quick answer, please. What are you seeing is the most common failure point in project controls that's actually impacting delivery outcomes?
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I'm not an expert in project controls or perhaps anything else, but I think we've spoken a lot about integration and the importance of it, and a key aspect there is the lack of a single source of truth quite often. So the importance of having common data environments, I think, is absolutely key, and having that connectivity between the different parties involved in these programs and having an integrated schedule. I mean, it sounds so basic, but it's so important. So people need confidence in the predictability of where things are going to go, how much they're going to cost, how long they're going to take. And I think equally having reliable benchmarking data that can inform sensible baselines that people can have confidence in and then keep it alive as we progress through delivery, that's absolutely key. So having common data environments is key, having the right resources. And again, a common topic we talked about today is capacity of resourcing. So having the right people, the right experience to inform these schedules and then keep them live and keep them relevant and keep that confidence through delivery is key.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And not for the first time today, I'm going to say it doesn't sound that hard. But I think I believe that's all the time we have today. So just wanted to share a huge thank you to all our panelists and thanks to everyone who's attended. I hope you found it really insightful and a helpful session. We'll be sharing the link to the Gleeds new report with you today. Please do download, take a look. There's a QR code link into the report. We really hope you enjoy reading it. Enjoy the rest of your day, wherever that may be. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Take care.